What if Pedro Pascal never became the superstar we know today? No Mandalorian, no Last of Us, no internet's favorite daddy. Sounds ridiculous, right? But it almost happened. Long before Pascal was a household name, he was juggling auditions, hoping for his big break. And then, opportunity knocked. Twice. 2 major roles landed in his lap at the same time, both tied to Netflix. One was a supporting role in Daredevil, the other was Narcos. Choosing the wrong one could have changed everything. At first, Pascal actually lost the Narcos role. Someone else got cast, so he moved on and auditioned for Daredevil. But just as he was about to test for the role, fate, or maybe Netflix itself, stepped in. The Narcos actor dropped out, and suddenly, Pascal had a second chance. Now imagine if he had stuck with Daredevil instead. Would he have ever become the Pedro Pascal we adore today? Or would he have faded into Hollywood's endless sea of forgotten faces? Let's dive into the role that almost changed everything. Before Pedro Pascal became the internet's favorite leading man, he was just another struggling actor trying to make it in Hollywood. And when we say struggling, we mean struggling. This wasn't the kind of struggle where you have a couple of slow months before landing a dream gig. This was a years-long grind, filled with rejection, uncertainty, and enough side jobs to make a resume that looked more like a scavenger hunt than a career path. Hollywood is a tough business, and for actors like Pascal, who didn't have immediate connections or a famous last name, it was an uphill battle from the start. Imagine a young Pedro Pascal, fresh out of acting school, bouncing from audition to audition, clutching a headshot that casting directors barely glanced at before muttering, "Next." He was willing to take any gig he could find, and most of them were blink and you'll miss it appearances on network TV. Some of his earliest roles? A vampire in Buffy the Vampire Slayer? Yes, really, and multiple guest spots on Law and Order. In fact, Pascal appeared on Law and Order not once, not twice, but 3 separate times, each time as a different character. That's how you know you're still on Hollywood's lower rungs, when you're getting killed off in one episode and coming back a season later as someone completely different. Pascal wasn't some overnight sensation. He didn't book one role and immediately become a star. No, he was grinding, showing up to every audition, delivering his best performances, and then waiting for that phone call that often never came. It was frustrating, exhausting, and at times, completely demoralizing. Like many actors trying to break through, he worked odd jobs to pay the bills. He waited tables. He taught acting classes. He considered quitting more times than he could count. In interviews, Pascal has spoken candidly about how hard those years were, how he watched friends find success while he was still stuck in Hollywood purgatory, waiting for someone to finally see him. But in 2014, something changed. After years of auditioning for major roles and getting passed over, Pascal finally landed a breakout part that would put him on the map. Oberyn Martell in Game of Thrones. Oberyn was unlike any character Pascal had played before. He was charismatic, dangerous, and effortlessly cool. A prince with a razor-sharp tongue and a deep thirst for revenge. The second he stepped onto the screen, fans took notice. Pascal didn't just play the role, he owned it. His performance was electrifying. A perfect mix of charm, arrogance, and lethal precision. Even in a show filled with larger-than-life characters, Oberyn stood out. And then came the fight scene, the infamous showdown between Oberyn Martell and Gregor the Mountain Clegane. It was brutal, it was shocking, and it left Game of Thrones fans in complete disbelief. Pascal's Oberyn seemed to have the upper hand, quick, agile, and fueled by righteous anger. But then, in one of the most gut-wrenching moments in television history, it all went horribly wrong. The mountain got hold of him, crushed his skull like a watermelon, and just like that, Oberyn was gone. His death scene didn't just traumatize viewers, it cemented Pascal as a force to be reckoned with. Even though his time on the show was short-lived, his performance was unforgettable. Overnight, he went from that guy who was on Law and Order a bunch of times to one of the most talked-about actors on television. But here's the thing about Hollywood. Just because you have one big role doesn't mean your career is set. The industry has a short memory, and for actors who aren't immediately scooped up for their next project, opportunities can dry up fast. That's exactly what happened to Pascal. Despite the buzz from Game of Thrones, he wasn't flooded with job offers. In fact, he found himself back in a position he knew all too well. Auditioning, waiting, hoping. For a moment, it seemed like Game of Thrones might end up as nothing more than a cool thing to put on his resume, rather than the launching pad he had hoped for. And then, just when it seemed like he was going to slip through the cracks again, Narcos came along. Pascal's audition for Narcos wasn't just another routine screen test. It was an all-or-nothing moment for him. He knew he needed to impress. He wasn't a household name yet, and he was up against actors with stronger industry connections and more leading role experience, so he went all in. He studied the history of the real-life DEA agent Javier Peña, practiced his delivery until his lines felt effortless, and walked into that audition room ready to own it. This was his chance to show that he wasn't just a guy who played guest roles on TV. He was leading man material. But he didn't get the part. Someone else did. It was the kind of disappointment that actors know all too well. You pour your heart into an audition, thinking it might be the one, only to get the dreaded "they went in another direction." At that point, most actors would have accepted the loss, dusted themselves off, and moved on to the next opportunity. It's just part of the game. And for Pascal, who had been in this position many times before, the only real option was to keep pushing forward. Instead of dwelling on the rejection, Pascal did what any smart actor would do. He pivoted. Another opportunity had popped up, a supporting role in Daredevil, Marvel's gritty superhero series for Netflix. It wasn't a starring role. It wasn't flashy. He wasn't going to be donning a superhero suit or leading the show. In fact, the character he was up for wasn't even a major villain or fan favorite from the comics, just a regular attorney in the legal world of Hell's Kitchen. Still, a job was a job, and in Hollywood, you take what you can get. Pascal wasn't in a position to be picky. He was already deep in the audition process, putting in the work to make sure he got the role. If Game of Thrones had taught him anything, it was that even small roles could turn into something special. Maybe this Daredevil part wouldn't be a career-defining moment, but it was a foot in the door with Marvel and Netflix. That alone was worth considering. But just as Pascal was preparing to test for Daredevil, something completely unexpected happened. Out of nowhere, Narcos came back into the picture. The actor originally cast as Javier Peña had dropped out, leaving Netflix scrambling to find a replacement. And just like that, Pascal's phone rang. He suddenly had a second chance at the role that had slipped through his fingers. Now, put yourself in his shoes. Imagine being an actor who has spent years struggling to get any role, finally getting close to securing a stable gig with Daredevil. And then, at the last second, being offered a much bigger opportunity. Stay in the running for a smaller part in Daredevil, or take the riskier but more rewarding starring role in Narcos. The choice might seem obvious now, knowing what we do about his career, but at the time, it wasn't so simple. Taking Narcos meant stepping into the unknown. It was a major role, yes, but there were no guarantees. What if the show flopped? What if Daredevil turned out to be the bigger success, and he had missed his shot at joining the Marvel Universe? This wasn't just about picking one job over another, it was about deciding the trajectory of his entire career. And as we now know, he made the right call. This is where things got weird. Normally, when actors choose between roles, they're deciding between projects from different studios or networks. But in Pascal's case, both Daredevil and Narcos were Netflix productions. He wasn't weighing an offer from, say, HBO against one from Amazon Prime. He was literally stuck in the middle of a Netflix versus Netflix showdown. It was like watching a company argue with itself over which of its own shows deserved the better talent. And caught in the crossfire, Pedro Pascal, the struggling actor who just wanted to land one good job. The absurdity of the situation wasn't lost on Pascal. Here he was, a guy who had spent years hustling in Hollywood, suddenly being courted by two different Netflix projects at the same time. It was almost laughable. Just months earlier, he had been auditioning for whatever he could get. And now, a single decision could determine his entire future. It wasn't just about picking between two shows, it was about choosing between two completely different career paths. On one hand, Daredevil was a superhero show, part of the ever-expanding Marvel Universe. It had built-in name recognition, an existing fan base, and the kind of long-term stability actors dream about. Even a supporting role in the Marvel ecosystem could lead to bigger opportunities down the line. On the other hand, Narcos was an ambitious but unproven true crime drama. It wasn't based on a comic book or a best-selling novel. There were no superheroes, no guaranteed action figures, no existing franchise to support it. It was raw, gritty, and entirely dependent on its storytelling and performances to succeed. If it worked, it could be something special. But if it didn't, well, Pascal could find himself unemployed again, with nothing to show for it but a missed shot at Marvel. And let's be real, at that point, choosing Daredevil would have been the safe bet. Even if the role wasn't flashy, Marvel projects had a track record of success. Who knew if Narcos would even make it past one season, Pascal had to make a choice. Stick with the safe, steady option, a small role as an attorney in Daredevil, or roll the dice on Narcos, a show that could either turn him into a household name or fade into obscurity. It wasn't just a job decision, it was a crossroads moment in his career. He could either take the stable, lower-profile path, potentially securing more Marvel work down the line, or he could take a chance on a project that needed a breakout star to succeed. We all know what happened next. He chose Narcos. And thank every streaming god he did, because that single decision changed his life. At the time, it might have felt like a gamble. But in hindsight, it was the move that launched him into superstardom. Once Pascal joined Narcos, everything started falling into place. As Javier Peña, he was cool, intense, and endlessly watchable. The show became a massive hit, drawing millions of viewers and solidifying Netflix as a powerhouse in original content. For Pascal, this was the role that finally put him on Hollywood's radar. He wasn't just a guest star anymore, he was leading a show. Suddenly, bigger opportunities came knocking. He wasn't just another that guy from Game of Thrones anymore, he was a leading man. Now, let's imagine an alternate universe where Pascal didn't take Narcos and stuck with Daredevil instead. Would he have had a major role? Nope. He would have played some lawyer guy, not exactly career-defining material. And let's be real, Daredevil was an amazing show, but it didn't skyrocket every actor to superstardom. Without Narcos, would he have landed The Mandalorian or The Last of Us? Maybe, but it's a lot less likely. He could have easily faded into Hollywood's endless sea of actors, never becoming the internet's favorite daddy. So yeah, Narcos wasn't just a good decision, it was the decision. After Narcos, Pascal's career exploded. He landed roles in Kingsman, The Golden Circle, Wonder Woman 1984, and of course, The Mandalorian. And let's not forget The Last of Us, where he absolutely crushed it as Joel. That role alone earned him Emmy and Golden Globe nominations. And now, rumors are swirling that he's joining the Marvel Cinematic Universe after all, this time as Reed Richards in the upcoming Fantastic Four reboot. From almost playing a nameless lawyer in Daredevil to possibly leading the Fantastic Four, that's what we call a glow-up. Looking back, Pedro Pascal's decision to ditch Daredevil for Narcos wasn't just a career move, it was a turning point. It was the kind of high-stakes gamble that could have either cemented his status as a leading man or left him struggling to find his next gig. If Narcos had flopped, we might never have seen him don the Mandalorian helmet or fight off clickers in The Last of Us. But it didn't flop. It became a massive hit, and so did he. And now, the guy who once had to fight for character number 6 in a Marvel show is reportedly set to play Reed Richards in Fantastic Four, one of the most important characters in the entire Marvel universe. Talk about a full circle moment. So, what's the lesson here? Sometimes the riskiest choices lead to the biggest rewards. And sometimes, saying no to one opportunity opens the door to something so much bigger. What do you think? Did Pascal make the right call? And which role of his is your favorite? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more stories just like this.